Just think about what your fantasy team could look like right now if you had stashed high upside players instead of waiting each new week for the waiver wire to bid on them against your opponents. Well, in today's video, I am bringing you 10 plus names. In fact, we'll probably hit around 20 names. So there's something for smaller and larger leagues of high upside stashes that you should grab before a breakout happens. So before we get into that top 10, I want to quickly mention some names that should already be rostered. They would take priority over any of the names I'm about to discuss. But of course, Trey McBride, we talked about him on this channel multiple weeks. He did have the breakout 2 weeks ago, and now Kyler Murray's returning. As far as Keaton Mitchell goes, I'm not so convinced that he's a league winner, but he's definitely going to be someone that is worth picking up and stashing on your bench. Let's see what happens. You don't play him this week, obviously, against the Browns. And then the rest of those wide receivers are all names that we've talked about in depth before. Some of you guys have picked them up, and they have helped you win some of your fantasy weeks. Okay, the number one stash for today, we're going to do something a little bit different for my number one stash. As we get closer and closer to the fantasy playoffs, you need to start thinking about your roster with a little bit more intention. Let me take you guys back to the year 2021. It was week 16 of the fantasy playoffs. My opponent, now I was in the playoffs, my opponent had Austin Eckler. Okay. Now, Austin Eckler went down with an injury in the fantasy playoffs, and he did not have his handcuff. So I, as his future opponent, picked up Justin Jackson, which was Austin Eckler's handcuff at the time, and I played Justin Jackson against my opponent in the playoffs. Justin Jackson ended up putting up 34 PPR points, so that ended up being a 68-point swing in my favor when you consider the points I added to my lineup and the points that he lost to his lineup. That was a huge reason why I advanced to the championship and ultimately won my fantasy league that year. So the number one priority for you guys right now as we get closer to the playoffs is to handcuff your star running backs. The worst thing that could possibly happen is you build a superstar squad, you get into the playoffs, and one of your stud running backs ends up going down with an injury, and now you have to fight your opponents to get that handcuff. Let's say you have Fab and you don't have any left. Let's say your league plays off of priority and the guy that you're facing has a better priority than you. You do not want to put yourself in that position. So let's think about this a little bit differently as we get closer to the playoffs. Things like handcuffs matter a little bit more. So if you have Christian McCaffrey, go out and get Elijah Mitchell. I know Jordan Mason was involved, but we have heard from the coaching staff that Mitchell will be the guy if CMC were to go down. Mitchell's available in about 80% of formats, only rostered in 20% of leagues. If you have Travis Etienne, go grab Tank Bigsby. I know you're not going to be able to start him. I know it's not exciting, but if Travis Etienne goes down and you're in the playoffs, you need Tank Bigsby, and he will be the hottest pickup that week. Tank Bigsby is wildly available. I know he's been struggling with some fumble issues, but he is, in my opinion, unquestionably going to be the starter if anything were to happen to Etienne. For Jonathan Taylor, go get Zach Moss. Zach Moss, at the time of recording this video, is rostered in 87% of formats. I don't think that's going to be the case after waivers clear today because I think a lot of people will drop him. Derrick Henry, go grab Tajay Spears. Ken Walker, go grab Zach Charbonnet. For Bijan, grab Algier. For Pollard, grab Rico Dowdle. For Javonte Williams, grab Jaleel McLaughlin. For Stevenson, go get Zeke. For Ford, go grab Kareem Hunt if he's available. For Aaron Jones, go get A.J. Dillon. And for Joe Mixon, go get Travion Williams. I know it seems unnecessary. You know, you're watching this video. You're telling me to go roster Tajay Spears when I have Derrick Henry? You're telling me to waste a roster spot, Zach. In reality, I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to save future you from any sort of pain and suffering that you might have to endure in your fantasy playoffs. Is it really worth you stashing that other guy you're never going to start instead of having security for your players at this point of the year? I know it seems unnecessary, but you got to cover your bases, guys. Now is the time to think ahead. Okay, so the number two player, now let's get into players, individual players, that I think you should be stashing 100%. I am very excited about this name. That is Michael Wilson, rostered in 7% of ESPN leagues and 19% of sleeper leagues. Wilson has been great in short spurts with limited quarterback play that's not really suited him. He had a breakout game in week 4. You guys probably remember that versus the 49ers. He put up 26 PPR points. Since that game, he's averaged 84% of the snaps and has looked great when he's been receiving targets. Now, the biggest thing here to remember is there is a big change at quarterback. Dobbs is out, Tune is out, Kyler Murray is back. We know how good Kyler Murray can be for his fantasy wide receivers. Obviously, Hollywood Brown is going to be the number 1 in this offense, but with how poor their roster is, I could see this team needing to throw the ball a lot, even with Kyler Murray back, and that can open up some serious flex appeal for a guy like Michael Wilson, who is super talented. We loved seeing him at the Senior Bowl, loved that he got drafted to this team, and you've seen some really impressive plays from him so far. So go grab him if you're looking for a future flex in the playoffs moving forward. And I'm curious to see what it'll look like right with Kyler back. That could be really interesting. All right, number 3. This is a player that has gone under the radar most of the year, and rightfully so. He's been injured, but he's coming back soon, and he needs to be stashed if you need a tight end. That is Pat Freiermuth, rostered in 40% of ESPN leagues and 41% of sleeper leagues. If you miss out on Trey McBride, consider Pat Freiermuth if he's out there. We call him Pat the Dragon. There's no way around it. Let's be honest. Let's be transparent. Pat has been awful for fantasy so far in 2023 between injuries, lack of targets, bad quarterback play. It's been pretty rough. However, I still believe he's a crucial part of this offense moving forward. An offense that is improving now that Deontay Johnson is back. Remember, this is the same Pat Freiermuth who, as a rookie, finished as a tight end 13. That's very rare to see. I know we have a great class this year, but that is not the norm. This is the same Pat Freiermuth who in 2022 finished as a top 7 tight end. Most of us would have had expectations for him to be top 12 this year. He's getting closer and closer to coming off the IR. And if you need a tight end, this is a fantastic stash option. And for a lot of you guys who have the IR spots in your fantasy leagues, you can pick him up, put him on your IR, and then when he comes back, you kind of have that roster spot already cleared up until he's back anyway. All right, at number 4, let's talk about a running back that you can stash. That is Leonard Fournette with the Buffalo Bills. He signed with them last week. He's rostered in 13% of ESPN leagues and 34% of sleeper leagues. Lenny didn't play in week 9, but we anticipate that he will make his debut here in week 10. He needed some time to get acclimated to the offense, to the city, to where he is, to find a home, all those things. Lenny is clearly past his prime. Let's all agree. This is not Jacksonville Jaguars Leonard Fournette. This is not even playoff Lenny. He's past his prime. I agree. But there are 2 reasons why I believe they signed him and why that could turn into fantasy success. Number 1 is goal line opportunities. They don't trust James Cook because of his size. Clearly, that's been very obvious this year. And Latavius Murray has not gotten the job done. The second reason is they need someone that can give them the combination of being good in pass pro and also a good receiver. James Cook is not a good pass protection running back. And Latavius Murray doesn't give you what James Cook does as a receiver. So they kind of want to find someone to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And Leonard Fournette could be that guy for them. He's a good pass protector and he's a good receiver. Don't forget how important Lenny was to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as a pass catcher in his tenure, with the Bucs. In 2022 last year, he had 73 receptions, 83 targets. He was 3rd amongst running backs in receptions. In 2021, 69 receptions, again, 3rd in receptions amongst the running back position. So if Lenny can carve out a nice little role for himself, there's a chance he becomes a viable fantasy option, keeping in mind that the percentage of chance that does happen is lower than the percentage of chance that it does. But let's say Lenny comes out next week, he plays 40% of the snaps, and he gets 5 targets. I think that's going to be a very attractive waiver wire pickup for people heading into week 11. So let's try and be ahead of the curve there a little bit. The 5th pickup that, I've been talking about this guy maybe 3 weeks in a row, maybe 4 weeks in a row, I can't remember, but y'all know I like him. He's still available in a lot of leagues. That is Pop Douglas. Go get you some Demario Pop Douglas. If you've been subscribed to the channel, you've heard me talk about him. He hasn't necessarily broken out yet, but there are a lot of signs to say that that could be on the way. He's led the wide receiver room in snaps, routes run, targets. He's done that in multiple weeks now, and he's clearly their best pass catching option on this team. You can see how much they love them. You can see his involvement growing week in and week out, and that could lead to a big fantasy breakout where he becomes their most reliable fantasy option. You know, we can't forget that at one point, Kendrick Bourne was someone that people were considering flexing in larger leagues. Okay, the sixth player that we're going to talk about here is Ty Chandler, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. He's rostered in 1% of ESPN leagues and 5% of sleeper leagues. Let's be honest, the Vikings running back room has been a nightmare in 2023. No one's really stood out. They traded for Cam Akers. Cam Akers was okay. Alexander Mattison has been fine. But then Cam Akers tears his other Achilles. He's out for the year. Clearly they weren't happy with Mattison. Otherwise, they don't trade for Cam Akers. So if Ty Chandler gets a chance at this backfield with Josh Dobbs being there, the offense continuing to roll, there's a chance that there's some serious fantasy value. If they get to the point where they're like, all right, that's enough. We tried as much as we could with Mattison. It's not working. Then Ty Chandler could present some value. Although I will say I do prefer Lenny of the two. All right, the seventh player that I am encouraging you guys to go pick up. And this is pretty sneaky, I would say. This is a pretty sneaky stash. And in deeper leagues, I really would encourage it. Let's talk about Cedric Tillman, wide receiver of the Browns, rostered in 0% of ESPN leagues, and well, less than one at least, and 3% of sleeper leagues. Keep in mind that Cedric Tillman was selected by the Browns in this year's draft in the third round, a top 10 pick in that third round. He's been inactive for most of the year, some of that dealing with an injury, and some of that being because Donovan Peoples-Jones was on the roster. But now Donovan Peoples-Jones is in Detroit. They traded him away. And in week 9, the first game without DPJ, Cedric Tillman saw a career high 74% of the snaps. His previous career high was 20%. He played 54 of 73 snaps, which was 9 more than Elijah Moore. He also had 25 routes run, again, starting to catch up with Elijah Moore. There is a chance, based on poor play from Elijah, that Tillman, there could be a crack here. He just needs a couple good performances, and he could step into that full-time wide receiver 2 role for the Cleveland Browns. I would not be surprised if he's a flexible play at some point this year. All right, the number 8 pickup for me is Cade Otton, tight end for the Bucks. If you miss out on Pat, if you miss out on the likes of a Trey McBride, consider Cade Otton. He's rostered in less than 10% of leagues everywhere. In the last 3 weeks, he's averaging 7 targets per game and is gaining the trust of Baker Mayfield on a weekly basis. You can see from week 6 onwards, 2 to 6 to 6 again to 9 targets last week. And what we know about the Bucks is they're comfortable letting Baker Mayfield throw the ball. If Cade Otton continues to gain more and more trust with Baker Mayfield, we could see better performances, for him on a weekly basis. And to end the stream, for all those people who actually stayed to this point, I'm giving you my favorite stash. You probably know who it is. This guy's been on the video series for 4 weeks in a row. And the reason he's been on the video series is because in certain formats, he's still widely available. I wholeheartedly believe that this player should be rostered in well over 80 to 90% of leagues everywhere. Okay? And that's not the case currently. This is, consider it your last call stash for Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray currently available in a high percentage of ESPN leagues and in some sleeper leagues. Kyler Murray is one of 5 active NFL quarterbacks to average over 21 points per game, over 20 points per game at the quarterback position in fantasy football. If you look at what he's done in his career, he has never been, since his rookie season, he has never been worse than quarterback 8 on a per game basis. his entire career, even if we include his rookie season, he's averaging 21 points per game. So where would 21 points per game, where would his career average rank amongst quarterbacks this year with what you're currently getting from quarterbacks this year? Well, I did these numbers before week 9, and you can see right now Kyler Murray's average amongst 2023 quarterbacks would be 4th. So he would be the 4th highest per game scorer amongst quarterbacks in 2023. Now, of course, that's not exactly reliable. He's coming off an injury, but the point is more that if you can add him for free off your waiver wire, you could potentially find the reason that you figure out your quarterback position, that you end up, for free getting a league-winning quarterback. So this is your last chance to pick him up. He will not be available from here on out. I promise you that. So those are all the stashes for today, guys. I could have gone even deeper, but I wanted to focus on, that top 10. Could have been even broader, but I think most of the other players I would have mentioned were not available rather. So do me a favor, go ahead and hit that like button to show some support. Subscribe if you like fantasy football. And if you want to support what we do here on Fantasyland Football, then go ahead and use our promo code LAND. Sign up to the Flock Fantasy website. You're going to get my weekly rankings, rest of season rankings, dynasty rankings. You'll get the best articles from the best content creators in the industry and more. Feel free to DM us with any questions, and let's go get some stashes. See you guys in next week's video. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.